So we're at the top of the hour, 6 o'clock CET, Europe, and we should perhaps get started. I see a couple of names dropping in the webinar. Just starting here, we've seen over the past few years a lot of moving parts, a lot of things happening. It's like watching a pendulum swinging back and forth, but it never really returns to the same place. Not long ago, everyone was going to be cloud, infinitely scalable, endlessly flexible, etc. And the traditional MAM was supposedly on its way to extinction. But we are here now in 2025, and what we've seen is that it's something much more interesting. The pendulum has found a new equilibrium, and most successful media organizations are operating on pure cloud. They're very much hybrid, building thoughtful solutions that combine best of both worlds. We want to talk about that. I'm Yuan from Codemill, and this balanced perspective is what we're going to talk about. It's going to be a conversation about how to navigate MAM transformation in a new reality where pragmatism trumps ideology and where the best solutions blend innovation with practicality. The purpose is to share practical insights from the field. We've done numerous projects throughout the years to see how media organizations are approaching MAM system replacements, basically, as not only tech upgrades, but as operational transformations. And I want to introduce the two speakers, Coralie Blanchard from Embrace and Neil Anderson from Codemill, who've led and participated in numerous MAM transformations over the years. Why don't you introduce yourselves in more detail? Coralie, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Coralie, and I've worked with Embrace for about a year. I'm a solutions architect. I worked with Neil in an effort to go through those MAM transformation projects recently. So we wanted to share some key insight about the project we've been involved with.
Yeah, hi everyone, Neil Anderson from Codemill. I've been at Codemill for about 5 years and have been involved with media asset management for about 15 years now. So working with a number of customers and partners worldwide, including some recent projects in France, Malaysia, the UK, that I've been very heavily involved with, and hopefully be able to pass on some of my insights during this discussion.
So, as I said, we want to do this more of a conversation rather than a presentation. So I thought I'd start by asking the both of you, Neil and Coralie, what are some of the general misconceptions clients or organizations have when embracing or going into a MAM transformation project?
Well, I think the biggest thing about transformations is it's not just about technology. I think we all can agree that technology can solve pretty much any problem that a customer has or experiences. But actually, a lot of it is about people and about the transformation and people management that is involved as well. So yes, we can move storage, we can migrate media, we can migrate metadata, we can migrate workflows, but how those users accept those changes and the user experience that they go through moving from different technologies, whether it's legacy on-prem hardware or whether it's desktop software that they're used to using for many, many years, moving to the browser, or whether it's replacing some of these legacy systems and moving to completely redesigned user interfaces. I think there's a big part of it is around project management, around people management. So engaging with teams, engaging with key stakeholders, of course, but also team leaders and your super users within all of the different teams and divisions that may be part of that transformation. Getting their buy-in is key. at least from my own experience, I've seen a whole spectrum of responses to a digital transformation. Some people are extremely open to change, willing, keen. They want to improve things. Others are very well settled in. They're very used to the workflows. They know exactly how everything works. They are key personnel. They've often been in media companies for decades in some cases. And some of them struggle with that change that they have not been used to for a while. And I think that presents itself in all sorts of problems. So engaging with change management professionals, with project managers, and with the key stakeholders to bring them along on the journey, as it were. The technology will solve those problems, and working with integrators and partners and developers and cloud architects and infrastructure people to help with that transformation physically, in terms of deployment and configuration and the training and the ongoing support. But being able to bring those users and key teams across and work with them to understand their needs at the most fundamental level. So the user experience, how they do their work, what is the most efficient way to do their work? I think that, for me, is the most important part of any digital transformation.
Neil, for that aspect, for me, it all starts with often with change management. You mentioned it, but at the end of the day, it's having a vision, a direction. We talk a lot about agility in technological projects, but how about agility at the beginning of the project, at the beginning of the transformation? We've seen together some projects where there are sometimes an RFP, an RFI, sometimes not at all. It's just, and I think, Corey, you will touch on that maybe later. It's a lot of workshops, a lot of iteration. What is your take on that when you start and what you've seen from the ground on how the best way to kickstart a project, to have that vision in mind and at least a direction?
The relationship between vendors and partners and the customer has evolved, certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, from traditionally, you would phone up your partner and say, hey, I want 10 edit suites or X 100 terabytes of storage. But with things like media asset management, it becomes much more about a partnership, because it's something that can potentially go on for multiple years. Projects, and there's no such thing as done anymore, especially in media asset management and media workflows. Everything is constantly evolving. What a customer needs at the beginning of a project may not be what they end up with towards the end of it, or as they go into different phases, because the business needs have changed. We've seen endless mergers and acquisitions in recent years. So again, different priorities come up all the time. So I think this is really where the key stakeholders are helping to drive the vision, and the team leaders and the people change managers are helping to then implement that. But it does require some flexibility. It's no longer sort of the idea that you have monolithic projects. You deliver something and that's the end of it. At least with our most successful projects, historically, those customers understand the need for continuous innovation, and the fact that everything changes constantly. And it's more of an evolution rather than something is being done.
Recently, we've worked together with Neil on a big project, and what we've seen is that they involved the end users from the start, and it really created adoption. It created ownership. They were contributors. They felt accountable for the success of the project, and it really helped. We were going through all the features they needed. We asked the right question. We challenged the needs. We were trying to figure out what are you trying to achieve. It built trust between us. So it really helped go on the right tracks from the start.
So to set those expectations, what type of governance do you put in place at the beginning of projects before you go through those meetings and those workshops? Is there a specific steering committee that you like to put in place? Is it changing from a project to another? How does that work from that end to set the scene?
It really depends. It's the customers that goes with their needs, but we need to have someone in charge, someone leading the thing from the inside. We can help, of course, but we need champions, we need sponsors, we need people that believes in the things that are done, and that can take a step back also and have a clear vision of everything. from the inside, because we stay external to the companies, so we don't know everything.
By the way, who are these teams? Is it IT, operational, engineering, a little bit of all? Do you see patterns?
Everybody needs to be involved from the start. That's my belief. I come from the field. I've worked 10 years in a post-production company, and I know change management can be complicated. And you need to talk to everybody. You need to be honest. You need to share. You need to communicate a lot. That's the right way to do it. When you force a technology from IT to the people on the ground, it never goes well.
Yeah, I think historically it's been tempting, at least when everything was on premise, that you would buy certain equipment, the technology or the engineering teams would just buy it, deploy it, and the users would just use it, get on with it. And I think that has changed now as we move to using browser-based solutions and moving towards using the cloud a lot more, is you need a single unified user interface for the users to be able to see only the data they need at the point that they need it. And I think gone are the days where people have lots of spreadsheets open, they're sending messages through email or through Slack, trying to understand what's going on in the system. Where is my stuff? Is something that we talk about internally, the constant challenge of trying to work out what the status is with a piece of media or a process. And I think, that user-based approach is what customers increasingly see as being the best way to success and the best way to get a good adoption of technologies. Of course, we're also seeing that there have been challenges with hiring in a lot of the media companies in the last few years. It's been a tough market. So, we're not going to see huge numbers of people being hired into these locations, into these studios and media teams. So being more efficient and the driver around efficiency is there's more pressure to do more with fewer people. And that means more automation, leveraging more AI services to do mundane tasks that would traditionally be very labor intensive, very mundane, very boring, even very error prone. Frankly, jobs that people shouldn't have to do. This is really where we can use AI and automation to be more efficient and to do more. And that really requires going back to that user experience, understanding the fundamentals of what the job involves. How can you reduce the number of manual clicks, manual checks, those sorts of things. That's really where we bring together different technologies. There are multiple partners that can deliver successful projects, whether it's systems integrators, whether it's front-end developers, orchestration partners, transcoders, AI services, the MAM vendors, and the media supply chain partners. But really, you have to come together as a team because often it is a multidisciplinary, multi-team project. Nobody is doing this all on their own. We own the whole system. That's not how it works. It's a collaboration increasingly. But ultimately, the user needs a single pane of glass in order to do their job as efficiently as possible. And that's where the transformation comes. That's where the measures of success are now, is that the younger generation, they're used to the web browser, they're used to apps, they're used to having that experience where things should just work intuitively. They're not expecting or they're not wanting applications that are designed by engineers 20, 25 years ago.
Totally agree. The best technology is invisible. If users feels confident, it's a success. And what's true also is that we're all searching for meaning in what we do. And I'm not thriving in copy-pasting files, moving files around, renaming files, doing all those tasks all day long. And that's the user-centric approach that we had to really ask them what are they doing on a daily basis and go back to the roots of what's useful, what gives value, and what's not. And we then take a step back, have a map of everything, and maybe we can that way find shortcuts between departments. Sometimes in a company, they don't even know what other departments are doing, and they might do some things similar or not useful. The approach we have, it helps having a vision over the entire thing and say, oh, but do you know this team out there is having the same exact problem that you do, and they're searching for the same solution, maybe we can find a shortcut between those.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see that if you look at some of the recent migration projects where you have a customer that has a legacy broadcast MAM for their linear programs, and then years later they've bought a different MAM system for their VOD or OTT platform or their social media. So now you have two MAM systems with essentially the same content, essentially the same metadata, and a complete duplication of workflow and duplication of users doing the same sort of work, and needing to migrate all of those systems and ways of working into a single platform to be more efficient and to try and touch the content as little as possible and only when they need to, managing by exception, um, rather than rekeying in data all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that scenario is not going to change. There's going to be new needs, new requirements going forward. How can we make sure that this continuous transition? It's not just one transition. It keeps on going. How can we manage that and make sure that's a smooth experience for the users and the companies?
Well, I think one thing that we've all seen is that the more open your APIs are, the more flexible your user interfaces are, the more you can customize if you need to. That flexibility makes for long-term usage of products and success, where the business needs change, launching new channels, new platforms, new partnerships, receiving content from different partners, deliver new content quicker and more efficiently. That comes from the flexibility. And I think historically, if you look at older generations of media asset management, for example, you had systems that were really only built for the broadcast world, that were not designed to work with VOD delivery or social media, or MAM systems that weren't designed to work with cloud services, or to be systems that couldn't work with the cloud at all or work with AI. I think these are the systems that customers are frustrated with and have reached their end of life with, and they can't move forward. And I think that's really where our solutions have been successful, is being able to give those customers the long-term commitment to development and support, but also the flexibility to move with the times. We've all got customers who've been using our solutions for a long time, even before the cloud. Um, but the fact is that they can now leverage those services as much as they want. I think that's where we talk about hybrid cloud now. As you were saying at the beginning, Ewan, a few years ago, it was all talk about everything moving to the cloud. We're moving everything. The reality is that that's not likely to happen for many customers. Most customers are not in that privileged position to be able to say, we're moving everything to the cloud. There is very much a need for using on-prem systems where you have studios, where you have stadiums, where you have venues that require local recording and local workflows that can then talk to remote collaborators and cloud-based systems. And, again, fortuitously, a lot of the solutions we developed have been built for those hybrid use cases. So it's not are you on-prem or are you in the cloud? It's often the customer is in both, and needs to maintain that need to support both.
Of course, it's the best of both worlds.
That's right.
So agility, Neil, when for me that rings a bell regarding how you redesign the workflows. Because when you're implementing a new system, a new MAM, new orchestration layer, we often hear, hey, don't replicate the old system, and that's linked to the agility. So one question regarding the evolution from a UX perspective, but also from a no-code, low-code perspective, to provide teams with sovereignty in the capacity to easily update, implement their workflows. How do you use low code, no code, and Codemill UX, expertise into that process to have at some point maybe a handoff, or having partners, helping the end customer doing that continuous development and integration?
We always see cycles of buy versus build. For a long time, customers have been building in-house systems themselves and hiring their own developers and their own UXers. Um, I think that the challenge that a lot of customers see now is that it's hard to retain that skill set in-house. A lot of younger generations, they move to different companies. There's more challenges and more demand for business going towards working for social media companies and some of these new technologies. And a lot of the traditional media companies struggle to retain that skill set. So it goes through cycles of that. I think with products, most products should be able to deliver 80% of the functionality that a customer needs with the option to do development or customization. If you look at the last 20%, maybe you look at 10% is the custom unique, what's unique to your business. The way you work is perhaps different to the way other users might work. But that final 10% you should probably never touch and never try and customize, because that's the hardest, the final 10%. So I think it is that being able to choose to build and buy. So you buy what you can, what you should, and you build what you have to. And you leave certain things that you probably shouldn't touch that are too niche a lot of the time and too challenging. Or you should prioritize those things and decide which is the most important. And this is where we get into, multiple phases rather than trying to boil the ocean with a big bang launch. Is you're doing a soft launch, starting with a minimum viable product, rolling out the core product, identifying key teams or key workflows that can be delivered with as much out of the box functionality, and then start delivering on customizations as they're relevant to the different teams or the different workflows. So that's how you can be more agile and be more flexible and go live quicker without trying to do everything all in one go. And I think that's where sort of low code and no code solutions come in. Being able to do configuration rather than customization, I think, is important as well. Doing as much out of the box with configuration.
We had an example recently. We worked on a project together, and a big customer they were challenging every feature they needed with us. They had this big list of things they needed, and line by line, we were going through it, and we were very honest on where it was about orchestration. We could have said yes to everything and put it into a custom dev or put it into the build, but we were very transparent. We challenged the features. We said both, maybe that subject is about orchestration, and it led to a more efficient project in the end because they introduced Pulsit into the project after that.
It goes back to, I think, for a lot of us in the vendor community, focusing on what you're good at and trying not to do all things to all people.
To put everything in the same box.
Yeah. I mean, it's very easy to go to say, oh, we chose vendor X because it's one throat to choke, as they used to say. But what you find with workflows nowadays is that no vendor has the entire end-to-end workflow. So actually it is about partnerships and integrations, what is available out of the box that you can configure versus what you might need to customize. Often clients will have their own proprietary scheduling systems. If they're a broadcaster, many of them have built proprietary scheduling and traffic systems over the years. Those are things that a partner probably doesn't want to touch. Let the customer do that custom integration for themselves. But if it's AI services or workflow orchestration, those things should be integrations. They should be easy to connect to and set up. And I think, that's where you're sort of choosing the partners, and the customer is choosing the partners they want to work with, the partners they can trust to deliver on successful projects and support and maintain them over the course of the lifespan of the software and the solution. Is, who are the partners who play well together? And I think if you want to be successful in this day and age, all partners have to work together. We see this ourselves where on paper you might think, oh, well, this vendor is a competitor to us. Oh, they do workflow orchestration, they do MAM, they do editing tools, etc. But if a customer chooses you as a partner, a preferred partner on a project, and says, you two, you need to work together, or you 6 companies, you need to work together to deliver a successful project, then you work together and you collaborate and you make sure you deliver successfully. So, I think it's around those sorts of collaborations and integrations nowadays, and not just sign here, we'll solve all your problems. I think, that's at least from Codemill's perspective. We're not in the workflow orchestration business. We're not in the business of automation. We're in the business of user experience, the front end user experience, how the users interact with the content and the metadata to make decisions. Everything else should happen in the background through automation, use of different services to analyze content. But ultimately, when a user needs to make a decision, that's when they use our interface rather than us saying, oh, we can do everything for you. That's simply not true. Nobody has the whole end-to-end workflow.
So agility is not only in the technology and the way you work, but also how you collaborate with your partners.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at some of the biggest projects we've been involved with studios, for example, they've selected what they consider best of breed partners to work with, that bring value in different areas of the workflow. And together we all then bring it together and collaborate multiple teams across many time zones to deliver success. That's really where it proves that these things work, these methods and approaches work. Um, it's not just about talking about it like we are here, but actually delivering on those projects. And the ultimate, we talked about this recently at NAB, Yuan, but how do you measure success? For me, the measure of success is case studies. Happy customers are the ones who will be happy to talk about you, to talk about their successes. That's the best reflection on how vendors and customers and partners work together. And it's a challenge, but there are increasingly certainly in the last few years, been ways of working that deliver success. We've all got experiences in the past where things have gone less well, and that's often poor communication for me. How can you, where do you, what's the most important single factor in success for any project? I think it's communication, effective communication.
Picking up on that, when you have seen, either one of you, Coralie and Neil, when you have seen things are not going in the right direction, what ways do you find or see to mitigate that and nip it in the bud?
I mean, it sounds obvious, but if a customer is gone quiet or
Oh, yeah.
a vendor has gone quiet, that should be the alarm bells ringing. And there's often very legitimate reasons. They're moving offices. We had a customer last year that was moving office right in the middle of, or right before going live on a major migration. You can't help those things, and often they're moving targets as well. Everyone thinks you'll move on the 1st of June, but actually you're moving on the 1st of September, and you're supposed to be going live on the 14th of September. I mean, these are the realities we're often faced with. And often, it's not just moving buildings, but you're moving different types of infrastructure as well. So, there are a lot of moving parts, and it goes back to effective project management. It's easy for customers to say, oh, I'm the stakeholder, I'll also do the project management. But the reality is, they have a day job. And as soon as they get called into some kind of an emergency, you no longer have project management. You no longer have that continuous communication. You don't have that stakeholder available all of a sudden. And then you can see communication starting to fall apart. So, from the customers, it's just as important that they're hiring or contracting in the right project management team, solution architects, user acceptance testing teams, project managers. All of these people are key to deliver success. And often because, heads of departments, C-suite executives, and senior users, they're going to be busy doing their day jobs. They're going to be doing QC, they're going to be doing editing, and it's going to be tough to find time with them. And that requires planning and effective communication. So it's almost a case of if the phone stops ringing, it's like you have to be proactive. You really got to push hard, double down on that communication and get it back to where it needs to be. Because I think that's where the most effective projects is in that very good, clear communication. So whether it's using Slack or Teams or conference calls, or better still, on-site visits, because we know now post-COVID, we're all sick of remote everything. I mean, this is one of the first webinars we've done in a long time. Face-to-face makes a huge difference in successful projects. The time Coralie and I spent with a customer last year, face-to-face workshops made a huge difference than if we'd been doing this from miles away.
Of course.
There's definitely mitigation strategies, and there's a lot to be said for face-to-face time now. Even though we have wonderful remote capabilities, it just the interactiveness, being able to look people face to face and get the nuance of what they're saying is for me really critically key. And how we try and engage with customers on big projects is have those on-site workshops whether it's technical, whether it's user meetings, where we're going through features and discussing functionality.
We've talked a lot about project management, PMOs, all this expertise required to put everybody in the room, finding the key stakeholders, the sponsorship, aligning everybody. Um, how do you guys work with partners, with integration partners? How do you see the role? Is this role have evolved over time? You mentioned, Neil, about how you used to buy a system in the past, and so how do you see that transformation going as well on that side?
I mean, having been a systems integrator for myself for 20 years, I went through that whole journey from, being a value-added reseller, selling kit, selling hardware, software, a little bit of services. But, those days, they're relatively rare nowadays. And I think for a lot of the partners and integrators, really leaning into the service side of the business, offering solution architects, offering developers, the ability to do customizations that are unique to the customer's needs. If the customer doesn't have that capability, then they can step in and say, well, we have plugins, we have the ability to do custom UI, UX, or an API integration. I think that's where the value proposition is. Obviously around things like support as well.
Support, yeah.
Being able to offer extensive support response times and out of hours support, remote login. Again, these are key areas where partners bring value. And obviously, with different time zones as well, having that immediacy of response or in the local language, again, working with partners in France, for example, it's the same thing, or in the Far East. So there is a lot of value that partners can bring. I think what's interesting is that some partners have made that journey over the last 5 or 10 years and definitely sort of are adding a full suite of services and cloud orchestration and DevOps and all these areas that are really critical. And again, a lot of customers are struggling to retain those skill sets in-house increasingly. And what I've seen in the last few years is being able to offer managed services as a partner. So no longer just saying, well, here's the software, here's the hardware, here's some services, but actually, can we offer you this as a platform, as a managed service to a customer? And I think there's real value to add because you're often dealing with creative media companies and even the broadcasters and the studios themselves, who can't justify that internal resource anymore, because they're fine with providing resources for B2C platforms, for consumer-facing apps or set-top box software for the consumer, but providing teams to support in-house B2B platforms, that's quite difficult for a lot of them to justify, especially in this day and age. And I think that's where some of our partners especially have been adding some really good value in the last few years, is literally saying, you know what, we'll manage the whole thing for you. We'll do the upgrades, we'll manage, out of hours upgrades and support, we'll continuously update. Those are the things where there's a lot of value to be added from a partner point of view, at least in my experience. And I think the partners that have really lent into that have had the success.
From the Embrace perspective, what I'm witnessing is that they have a new eye on the tool because it's a low-code orchestration tool. It gives infinities of possibilities. So most of the time, they have new ideas that we would have even thought of in the first place. So that's great value for us.
Yeah, and where those partners are really close to the customer as well, where they've got long-standing relationships, they can really use your technology, in particular Pulse It, to really significantly improve workflows without having to resort to custom scripts and custom development. Again, it goes back to, can you configure it rather than do we have to customize it? Nobody really wants to have to maintain custom code unless they absolutely have to, like it's a proprietary scheduling system or an obscure OTT platform. Yes, there will be a custom API involved. But if it is about just orchestrating transcoders and AI services and notifications and converting code scripts to transform different parts of the workflow, that should be configuration. And I think that's the value that we see from a Codemill perspective, working with a partner like Embrace, is again focusing on what they do well and focusing on what we do well is where our collaborations have been successful over the years as well. So yeah, I think that's that's sort of a lot of the key parts in success that partners bring.
So far, we've spoken very little about technology, which is kind of the takeaway message, perhaps, from all of this. I also hear that it's not, it's seldom a big bang anymore. It's a continuous process where you keep delivering value to the customer, and they can get started. It's no longer a 4-year project. Do you have any comments on that? How we can, I mean, how short can you get?
Yeah, I mean, the deployment itself is quite trivial. Yes, there's a certain amount of configuration, that depending on how complex the workflows are. But if you're breaking it down into phases and priorities and, what is the MVP that we can get going with, that we can go live with, where can we add the most value the quickest?
Yeah.
Those things, they can take weeks. They don't have to take months, and they certainly shouldn't be taking years. I mean, I still find it terrifying that there are projects that we hear about on the grapevine and the customer hasn't gone live for years. I don't understand how that can be allowed or justifiable. I mean, there's seriously something wrong if it's taking that long. I mean, it should be a case of being able to go live in weeks or a few months, really, you know, um, even with complex projects. I mean, some of the most complex projects we've done, the customers have been live within 6 months. And you consider that this is a full, hybrid cloud deployment, migration of multiple systems, refactoring of multiple workflows, UX workshops, standing up all sorts of technologies and integrating with them. To be able to do it in months should be the norm. In an ideal world, it would be even quicker, but we're dealing with what I would call brownfield sites. There are very few greenfield sites. So we are dealing with a lot of legacy systems, and some of those systems aren't ready to be retired yet. We talk about auto QC systems, third-party transcoders, different storages, different archive systems. A lot of those things take time, but a lot of the work can be done in parallel if you allocate the work to, small, efficient groups of teams of developers and solution architects and engineers. So being able to deliver that functionality in the quickest possible manner, so the customer's using it, they're getting confident, that you're getting feedback, more importantly, because again, nobody's saying everything's perfect from day one, but the fact that you can continuously improve, that's really where you get the customer satisfaction. And it's important, to think about, when we talk about continuous innovation, is that, the business, the customer, the CFO, they need to understand that from a budgeting point of view anymore. It's not just we buy this and we sweat it for the next 5 years and we're not going to touch it and we're not going to upgrade it. But it's actually about, no, you will continuously want to upgrade it. You will continuously want to allocate resources to focus on different business priorities. Because one thing we've seen in the media industry is that change is the norm, and we're going through more change now than we have done, frankly, as far as long as I've been in this industry. What AI is challenging us to resolve and to be more efficient with the resources that are available. I think, that change is something that we all need to be addressing.
We're looping back to the involvement and the momentum, because if you identify quick wins, you can just go through that momentum with the users and get the adoption going and gain momentum and gain success.
Again, it's about the people. There is, however, a technical aspect to this, and I think today we wanted to show or talk about how we can actually find ways to work together with the users, with our partners, with the stakeholders, etc. But we do have implementations as well. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Emmanuel, I think, to talk about some other things that might be happening going forward.
No, we wanted to say a word about, obviously, when you've done all this migration, all this work, obviously you want to look at the new world of possibilities that you have with your Codemill and your Pulset, with your new system, with your modern media supply chain. And I think we touched on a very important aspect is the agility, because there is not anymore this concept of workflows or business processes that are going to stay for years. Things are going to change very fast. Neil touched on it. The industry is moving very fast. New audiences that are moving into new screens, new projects, new editorial projects coming in. So you need to have that agility. You need to have that hybrid deployment capability. You need to be able to manage, and this is something that's we will talk probably more during a next webinar. Is all about the metadata, because that is also a lot of things are changing on that side, and most importantly, this idea of having a custom user experience that is really key, and that is enabled by no code, low code. So uh, obviously, managing the transition is key in projects, but the reality of the hybrid deployment, low code, no code approach, tooling with users, at the center of everything you will do, will give you obviously much more flexibility in the way you can address the challenges and the new projects moving forward. So I think this was an idea, and thank you, Coralie, for putting that together. Maybe you have a few comments on that as well. But yeah, we wanted to wrap up a little bit on this new state, modern state that you can reach by deploying Codemill and Embrace solutions.
No, I just wanted to illustrate a few things that we mentioned during the conversation. And I also had a quick anecdote about the one on the left. We had the user asking us with Neil, but problem is the person I'm working with, they don't want to change tools. They don't want to change the tab. They don't want to learn a new tool. And what's great about the partnership we have is we managed to kind of transform Persit into Cantemo to make them believe they're still in the same interface. So that was the point into the illustration on the left. I really like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we said it earlier. I mean, we feel that at least that the technology is the easy part, but it's about working with people at the end of the day and collaborating and communicating that really brings the success. I mean, everything that we're showing here in this illustration, I mean, these are sort of functionalities, capabilities to help with digital transformations. But I think the key here is that the solutions are flexible, and that they can be integrated, and that we require good partnerships and relationships in order for success. And that comes from the human attributes ultimately. Working with the users, working with the teams, working with different partners, whether it's technology partners or systems integration partners. If they're bringing value, then that's where everyone can come together and be successful.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So I think I want to end things here and say thank you. Jeff has actually a question now. Do you have guidance for us trying to find new prospects, like a list of 5 discovery questions?
I've got way more than 5. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I have put together some documentation in the past around some of the typical questions you might want to ask. It is very conversational. I mean, I would say a series of workshops to get that customer engagement. But yeah, we can certainly look at helping provide some insights into what those questions might be. I mean, a lot of what we've talked about here, of course, touches on it. But yeah, there are a lot of questions that you need to be aware of, and gotchas. And it's a lot of it is that discovery phase, trying to really understand the customer needs deeply, and the closer you are to the customer, And the more that you understand their workflows, I mean, I think that's the value that partners have, is really getting close to those customer relationships and managing those and being part of that experience and helping them on their journey, because it's hard for them. There's a lot of legacy systems. Some of them can't be easily migrated, if or migrated at all. And so then it's about rethinking the ways of working. And that really needs some creative thought as well, and working with all of us to come up with, improvements and innovations. So, yeah, absolutely, we'd be happy to share some of those insights as well.
Excellent. I want to say thank you
Thank you.
for spending time with us, and we'll see you at the next event.
And by the way, just quick info: we will be at MPTS for those of you in the UK with Neil tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and obviously we'll be at IBC. We will send you a quick questionnaire after the event, and yes, NAB New York is on the list, obviously, and to get in touch with us, contact at embrace.fr. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.